What do you think will happen when one of the most beloved women in entertainment industry history comes out and reveals that everything you thought you knew about it is a lie? Watch this video until the end to find out what Barbara Benton revealed that shook the whole world. There is nothing left to imagine. She was born a lot different from the woman we know her as today. She used to be called Barbara Lynn Klein, a young California girl, bright, hopeful, studying at UCLA, a pre-med student with real dreams, maybe a future veterinarian, one day stepping into a career that might heal, not just glitter. But by 18, she was no longer just a student. She was modeling department store clothes. She was testing the waters. Then one evening she walked onto the set of a television show called Playboy After Dark. She was 18. On stage, lights dimmed, cameras rolling, a magazine empire looming behind the scenes. She had no idea she was about to stumble quietly, irrevocably, into someone else's machine. We won't hold you off and reveal everything right now. He was 42. The host, the founder of that empire, was Hugh Hefner. When he first saw her on the set, according to some accounts, his eyes landed on her and something changed. The photograph of that moment may exist, one of countless snapshots of control and calculation. He approached her with charm, persistence. "A date?" he asked. She pulled back. "I've never dated someone over 24, she said. She was young, innocent. He replied, "That's all right, neither have I." And with that, the bridge between promise and peril began. Her name wasn't glamorous enough. Barbara Klein lacked the shine for the world he was building. So she became Barb Benton, a rebranding, a new face. But more than that, a conversion. The girl with ambitions was reshaped into a product: youth, beauty, compliance, marketable femininity. The name change wasn't cosmetic only, it was symbolic. Her identity, repurposed. Within months, she wasn't just an extra on a show, she was co-hosting. She was the rising star of the empire. And soon after, she began appearing in the pages of Playboy, covers in 1969, 1970, 1972, later pictorials in 1973 and 1975. Nude spreads, posed glamour, seductive innocence, sold, consumed, objectified. Her body became a canvas for fantasies, her youth commodified. She was never Playmate of the Month, but she was more. She became the face of Playboy's vision for idealized femininity. Imagine 18, maybe 19, stepping into a world where adoration is not accidental but engineered. The camera does not fall on you by chance. The lighting, the angle, the pose, all calculated. The mansion is waiting, the promise of glamour, privilege, travel, and music. A record deal beckoned. Dreams she might once have had of healing, of a normal life, of self-determined ambition recede. In their place, vinyl, photo shoots, magazine covers, a new path. Someone else drew. She tasted the glitter. She climbed the ladder. She accepted. But under those bright lights, behind the magazine covers, a subtle machinery shifted. A machine built not for her freedom, but for her utility. Her youth and beauty became currency. Her name, carefully crafted. Her body, packaged. She was no longer Barbara Klein. She was Barbi Benton, the living product, the asset, the visual promise. A Barbie doll was the nickname the empire cemented around her, a nickname she came to resent. In some academic analysis of Playboy's culture, that doll image became emblematic. Women transformed into aesthetic objects, stripped of complexity, reshaped for male fantasies. You have to picture it. A young woman, uprooted from ordinary aspirations, thrust into a world that whispered glamour, whispered fame, whispered power, but defined success by conformity, by visibility, by compliance. She walked into sound stages, into glossy photo shoots, into a mansion that would one day become legendary. She posed in swimsuits, in lingerie, on centerfolds. She smiled for the camera. She became a fantasy. And all around her the gears turned. The empire evaluated every lock of hair, every shine of skin, every angle of cheekbones. She was measured against expectations. She was elevated. She was marketed. Yet behind that market, behind that glossy facade, the choice she made to trade student life for spectacle was not just personal ambition. It was a submission. Submission to someone else's vision, someone else's appetite, someone else's empire. At 18, she thought she was stepping into opportunity. But by 19, by 20, she was deep inside a system where youth equaled value, where beauty equaled currency, where her identity was no longer hers. The idol she became had no soul, only demands. And the empire provided the light, the camera, and the ladder. But it also provided the strings. This part of her life, innocence, promise, transformation, this is where the story begins. Not with scandal, not with confessions, with a choice, a rebranding, a metamorphosis, a trapping of youth and hope behind the chrome sheen of fame. The mansion glittered with freedom, yet every smile and glance was measured, every laugh catalogued. What had seemed like liberation was already a system of rules she didn't see, a web she was learning to navigate. Step by step, she understood that glamour carried expectation, and desire came with its own cost. To be honest, the mansion was not merely a house. It was a stage, a laboratory, a fortress of control. Marble floors reflected the chandeliers, but they also reflected the lives contained within. Young women swept into orbit, their futures measured in inches of skin and curves. Barbi Benton, already renamed, already remade, moved through those rooms unaware of the invisible strings. The grotto, the jacuzzis, the artful gardens, every space was curated for the illusion of leisure, laughter, freedom. And yet the architecture whispered something else. Containment, observation, evaluation. Cameras hidden in corners recorded smiles and flirtations that were rarely spontaneous. The mansion shaped desire, guided it, measured it. She posed, she laughed, she glided through corridors with a seeming ease that belied the meticulous orchestration surrounding her. The record labels, the photographers, the producers, all aligned to craft the image of Barbi Benton, playful, available, desirable. Not a woman exactly, not a student, not an aspiring professional. An object whose movements, expressions, and even laughter were cataloged, edited, and sold. The control was not always overt. It did not require force. It required subtlety, seduction, and reinforcement. Praise mixed with expectation, glamour mixed with surveillance. Every photograph frames more than a body. Every album cover, every camera angle reinforced a narrative. Youth is currency, beauty is submission. Benton's musical career began under this same architecture. Her first album, her voice produced, marketed, and packaged, was touched at every stage by the hand of the empire. Songwriters selected by Hefner, the artwork designed under his instruction, the image polished for mass consumption. She was present, but her choices were bounded, framed. She could sing, she could perform, she could smile, but only within the lines someone else drew. Each decision became both an opportunity and a restraint. The machinery offered fame, wealth, applause, and exacted a price in autonomy. It was a world that required constant negotiation of self. Smiles were expected, seduction rewarded, and obedience rewarded more. To resist was to risk irrelevance. To comply was to be complicit in the engine of exploitation. She was not alone. The mansion housed dozens of women navigating the same waters. Some thrived, some quietly resisted, some were swallowed. The difference between safety and peril was measured not in rules, but in subtlety, tone of voice, body language, eye contact. The smallest deviation could mark a woman for exclusion, erasure, or objectification. And the lessons were learned early, encoded in the very culture of the empire. The mansion itself was a character, shaping behaviors with spatial design. Jacuzzis weren't just for leisure. They were stages for demonstration. Game rooms weren't just entertainment. They were arenas for testing compliance. Hidden cameras captured interactions meant to produce the appearance of casual flirtation, but often facilitated observation, assessment, and manipulation. Benton's laughter, once genuine, was now a signal, a data point. Her glances, gestures, and even silences were interpreted, catalogued. The house instructed behavior before anyone spoke, and yet within this, there was an intoxicating freedom, or the appearance of it. Parties swirled, champagne flowed, music pulsed. For a young woman of her age, the glamour was nearly irresistible. It offered adventure, escape from mundane routines, and the thrill of admiration. The risk was invisible because it was embedded in desire itself. Pleasure and submission were entwined. She was learning that compliance could be rewarded with opportunity, that ambition could be traded for image. Every day, the negotiation of self continued. How to smile, when to speak, which gaze to hold, which to avert. The rules were unwritten, the penalties subtle but deep. Her public persona blossomed. Album covers, magazine spreads, and television appearances all projected a curated version of herself. And behind that persona, she learned restraint. There was a cost to freedom. Every exposure, every photograph, every public smile fed the machine. She was both a star and a product. The pleasure of recognition was laced with the quiet understanding that it existed because of submission. She felt the tension, but perhaps did not yet know the weight. The tension escalated further when considering the mansion's darker realities, documented by those who followed after her time and by some contemporaries. Hidden surveillance, coercive dynamics, and manipulations designed to erode resistance. Women reported being encouraged to participate in sexualized games, drug-induced interactions, and exposure to voyeurism. Barbi Benton's proximity to this world cannot be ignored. She walked the corridors, attended the gatherings, experienced the culture. She moved through the spaces where consent and desire were constantly reframed by power. She may have escaped the extremes, but she existed inside a system that normalized the violation of autonomy for entertainment and desire. By the end of her years in the mansion, Benton's innocence had been tested. The glamour, the fame, the music, the television, all came at the cost of negotiation with a predatory system. Her identity, once clear, had been reframed repeatedly to align with an image conceived by another. She was admired, celebrated, envied, desired, yet she had internalized the tension between self and image, freedom and expectation, agency and coercion. And around her, the mansion hummed with its invisible machine, instructing every movement, guiding every glance, structuring every opportunity, producing countless futures like hers, each a delicate balance between empowerment and exploitation. By the time her image was fully shaped, the mansion's subtle guidance had shifted into orchestration. Spaces once playful, jacuzzis, gardens, and private rooms became arenas of observation and control. The rules she'd learned were no longer benign. They were part of a machine designed to extract, shape, and dominate. Only now, in hindsight, does the darkness behind the gilded doors come into focus. The mansion's doors closed behind countless women who never fully understood what awaited. It was a cathedral of illusion, gilded and polished, glittering in the California sun. Barbi Benton had already walked its halls, already smiled for its cameras, already learned its subtle rules. But inside, beyond the smiles, beyond the music, beyond the laughter, a darker reality thrived. The secrets of the Playboy Mansion, as later documented in testimonies and investigative accounts, revealed a world not of innocent play, not of carefree freedom, but of structured, predatory power. Women spoke years later, their voices shaking but clear. The parties were organized not just for spectacle, but as instruments of control. Drugs circulated, subtly administered, coaxing compliance, dulling resistance. Cameras, hidden and omnipresent, recorded interactions meant to appear casual but designed to surveil, evaluate, and manipulate. Guests observed women not as friends, not as colleagues, but as elements of an ecosystem of desire, available, pliable, expendable. Some women were recruited with the promise of fame and fortune. Others were drawn by curiosity, by admiration, by the seductive whisper of glamour. All were subject to rules that were unwritten but absolute. The mansion functioned as a living organism, where every smile, every movement, every glance became data. Compliance was rewarded with access. Hesitation was punished with exclusion or erasure. Participation in the sexualized culture was often normalized, often encouraged, and sometimes subtly coerced. Barbi Benton moved within this system. She was never named among the most extreme accounts of abuse, and yet she existed inside the same machinery. She was present in the corridors where seduction was orchestrated. She attended gatherings where the lines between consent and coercion blurred under the sheen of glamour. Her youth, her beauty, and her ambition made her a prize within this ecosystem, a star yet a subject. She benefited, yes, but always within the parameters dictated by the empire. Every photograph, every performance, every public smile was simultaneously a personal triumph and a submission. Testimonies from other women illuminated the extremes. Sandra Theodore recalled parties where sedatives were administered, where sex was orchestrated, where cameras watched, where the veneer of choice was meticulously crafted but ultimately illusory. She spoke of how one could feel the agency slip away in subtle increments, measured by the laughter expected, the glances held, the compliance rewarded. Behind the gleaming pools and artful gardens, autonomy was constantly tested. The mansion's environment was engineered to seduce, to charm, to entrap, and to exploit. Dorothy Stratton, the tragic figure whose life ended violently, became the ultimate warning of what could befall young women entangled in this world. Her story, covered extensively in mainstream media, illustrated how the allure of fame, youth, and male attention could collide with coercion, control, and danger. The mansion, the parties, the empire, they produced both opportunity and peril, glamour and devastation, light and shadow intertwined. Barbi Benton's proximity to this darkness is telling. She smiled in photographs. Yes, she performed, she sang, she charmed the cameras, but she was always navigating a world constructed to shape her, to frame her, to bend her presence into a consumable ideal. She saw the patterns, the subtle enforcement, the culture of manipulation that became obvious in retrospect. She witnessed, even if indirectly, the machinery of sexual exploitation, the orchestration of pleasure as a tool of power. Her own choices were constrained by the system, her image curated, her body and talent woven into the fabric of the empire. This is where the diabolical truth becomes undeniable. The mansion was a predator, not a host. The rooms, the gardens, the pools, all became instruments in an ecosystem of power. Youth, beauty, compliance, curiosity, they were the bait. Cameras, parties, music, glamour, the hooks. The empire operated on observation, on subtle coercion, on psychological manipulation that blurred consent. Women who entered were not merely visitors. They were participants in a carefully structured system that commodified desire, tested agency, and enforced compliance. And Benton, existing within it, was both witness and participant. The cost of participation was psychological, moral, and emotional. Each photograph, each televised appearance, each album is simultaneously success and submission. Her survival required negotiation, compliance, charm, and adaptability. She learned the rules of a predatory ecosystem without a rulebook, and she moved within it with intelligence and poise. Yet proximity does not erase exposure. She walked the halls where coercion thrived, where autonomy was constantly tested, where young women were objects, prizes, and victims in a system designed to exploit. The reveal is not scandalous in the tabloid sense. It is systemic. The horror is structural, diabolical in its precision. Barbi Benton may have escaped the extremes suffered by others, but she cannot escape the truth of the environment. A mansion engineered to transform youth into commodity, to shape bodies and behavior to fit a vision of desire, to use glamour and power as tools of coercion, subtle and pervasive. The doors closed behind her each day, but the echoes of control, of objectification, of manipulation, persisted, unrelenting. The mansion's facade had crumbled under testimony and memory, revealing orchestration and coercion. The women who survived spoke, the cameras that watched were exposed, and the machinery of control was laid bare. Benton had left before the worst horrors surfaced, yet her story remained entwined with the system. She left the mansion, but the shadow stayed with her. The corridors that once echoed laughter now seemed to stretch empty behind her departure. For the women who came later, the nightmare immersed in glitz was already in full motion, and those who survived began to speak. In 2022, the world finally confronted the hidden truth behind the gilded gates. A docu-series surfaced. Former girlfriends, playmates, and longtime staff testified. They described what was once whispered and covered up as fact: constant surveillance, drug use, sex parties, and blackmail. One woman, a former girlfriend, said that in her time, the women had been groomed and led to believe they were part of this family. He really did believe he owned these women. Another recalled that the mansion was bugged. Cameras and microphones were hidden everywhere, from bedroom walls to garden corners. Drugs were not peripheral. According to several testimonies, there was a drawer in the mansion filled with Quaaludes. The former girlfriends say he used them to manipulate compliance. Staff say women returned from parties disoriented, memories blurred, compliance not a choice but a consequence. They spoke of sex tapes. Hidden cameras in bedrooms recorded much more than consensual encounters. They started to function as tools of control. Former employees said that Hefner may have kept a mountain of compromising footage, warning girls implicitly, "Leave, and everything goes public." Then came the worst. In the testimony of some women, what started as erotic fantasy devolved into horror. Assaults, drug-facilitated exploitation, and even bestiality were claimed. A former bunny mother alleged that 2 girls were tied, drugged, and brutalized. After that, Playboy's security stepped in, and the incident was hidden from the world. They said the parties weren't random. According to witnesses, group sex became routine, protocol orchestrated. The women knew. To refuse was to risk being erased, their absence forgotten, their stories silenced. Over the years, some who refused to remain silent found themselves ostracized, discredited, and silenced by reputation and power. Others carried scars deeper than any visible wound. Depression, substance abuse, a constant tension between what had been promised, glamour, career, belonging, and what had been delivered. Survivors talk of the mansion as cult-like. The environment was engineered to isolate, to disorient, to offer just enough reward to keep them tethered. The promise of fame masked an underlying structure of control. And yet, among all those stories, there's silence where one might expect confession. The woman who walked through those same doors decades earlier, Barbi Benton, is not named among the accusers. She left the scene long before many of the worst allegations came to light publicly. Her exit may have saved her from exposure, but proximity alone binds her to the darkness. She inhabited the same spaces, played under the same lights, learned the same silent rules. Her career, her image, her identity, all shaped by a machine that later told the world it was more than just a magazine. She was never photographed screaming. There is no court record, no lawsuit in her name making the most sensational claims. But survival and complicity are not always mutually exclusive. To be part of the machine is to bear its influence, even when one escapes its most violent claws. Now, in the aftermath, the truth of the mansion is exposed not just as fantasy, but as a predatory construct. The legacy she was part of is stained. Not every story ends in victimhood, but too many of them echo with trauma. And her story, part escape, part survival, stands as a testament to how deeply ambition, youth, and beauty can be misused in a system built to devour. As the cameras roll over testimonies, as the world watches and listens, one question lingers. How many more never spoke? How many did not survive what she witnessed, what she contributed to, what she escaped? The empire that once promised freedom behind velvet and champagne is now revealed as a cage. And her light, once meant to shine, now reflects the shadows behind the mansion's walls.